This is Joann Small. My husband William and I are talking with Robbie Beasley this afternoon. It is Sunday, July 8th, 2018, and we are talking with him for Coastal Voices. Robbie, tell us a little bit about growing up here in Dare County.
Okay, I grew up, I was born in Manteo. I grew up on Collington Island. The place was not developed like it is now. There was a single lane dirt road coming into Collington, and which is quite a switch. I guess today it is the busiest secondary road in the state of North Carolina. Supposedly the guy at the gate said he checks in 9,000 cars a day. But anyway, back then it was a single lane dirt road. And when I was a kid, I guess they widened that dirt lane and then paved it when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old.
And what year were you born?
1947. Anyway, so it was early 50s when they paved that road, and I can remember people when they were some people were driving on that. If they had open vehicles like Model Ts or something, they for a while when they first paved it, they would end up being full of tar and rocks and everything else. They'd have to clean themselves up when I mean that was right when they first paved it. But anyway,
what about your parents and grandparents?
Yeah, my dad was born. He grew up on the Nags Head side, and he was born here in 1897. And his dad. Let's see. I do have when his dad was born, but anyway, let me check that. Well, let's see. He was born in William. Well, anyway, he said his dad was a child during the Civil War because he would that would have been 1861 to 1865. Now, how old, whether he was in his early teens or whether he was 10 years old, I'm not sure, but we'd have to check this. But anyhow, he said his dad would accompany his mom. She made money selling pies to the Union Army down here during the Civil War. And anyway, now my great-grandfather came from England, and the story my dad tells is that he was on a ship loaded with brick in a northeast storm, and the ship was sinking, and he swam ashore. Now my sister says that is debatable about whether that actually happened. Now the way my dad told it, he came. They were headed for New York, but when they came from Europe, they actually came to the coast off of Hatteras Island. And my dad said that's where, that when he swam ashore, he was actually down in the Rodanthe area. And of course, my dad, he handled the truth recklessly. He said when he came ashore, he was still smoking his pipe. No, but I
in a northeaster, that might be debatable.
I doubt it. But anyway, my sister says that they haven't been able to authenticate the fact that he actually swam ashore. So. But anyway, on my father's side of the family, a lot of the people grew up on Hatteras Island and eventually moved back this way. And I noticed he was married, this Samuel Beasley was married to Lydia Gallup, and I think my dad told me one time that he actually lived over in the Point Harbor area for a time. But my dad, like I say, grew up on the Nags Head side, and my mom, she lived over on Collington Island.
So that's how he got to Collington.
Yeah. My dad, his first wife died with tuberculosis, and he had 3 daughters. And then my mother was a lot younger. He married her later. I was born on his 50th birthday, and she was only 33, I believe. So anyway, it was a big age difference between the two of them. Anyway,
I think that was fairly common years ago because a lot of first wives did die.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Childbirth and other things. So, tell us when you started in your business, or did you take over from your parents?
Okay.
How
No,
did that?
no, my dad was very poor. He didn't have equipment to work with, and plus he didn't have any education. I don't think he only went to like the third grade in school or something. Now my mother was a lot more intelligent. She graduated back then. It was only 11 grades. It was not 12 grades. But anyway. He depended on working in the fishing business with somebody else that had equipment,
Right.
which means you're dependent on how hard they want to work, and plus you're going to get a small share. In other words, you're not set up in a situation where you have incentive to work hard and make a lot of money. So anyway, he struggled all the time. But when I was 11 years old, actually I was talking to people, learning how to catch crabs with a trot line, where you have a slip knot with a bait every 4 feet, and we set that line out, and you come along to one end of it with a buoy on one end and hook your line, and you have a board with a roller on it with pegs to make sure your line don't slip off of your roller. You have pegs, and anyway, as the crabs come up out of the water, they hang right on those baits, and we bailed them off with a round wire basket type dip net, one that's not collapsible. It was a firm wire basket, and that's the way we caught. That was really like it was really like an old-fashioned way of crabbing. We didn't even know about the crab pots back then. I was only 11 years old. But anyway, actually, I actually ended up teaching my dad how to do that with those crab lines. He'd always been in the fishing business, never done any crabbing, and so anyway, we did that for up until when I guess I did that in the summers when I was going to college. And I went to college, East Carolina, and I graduated in 1969. But anyway, when I came back from Vietnam in 1971, then from then on we used the crab traps, the crab pots we call them.
So was there ever any question when you went away to East Carolina, was there ever any question in your mind that you would do something else other than come back for crabbing?
Yes, the only thing is I did not have any guidance from my parents or anybody into what I needed to study. So when I went to East Carolina, I was majoring in psychology, which was not going to do me any good. And somebody should have. Unless you want to you got to have a doctorate. And plus 1 year of postdoctoral internship. So unless you're committed to go in 9 years, and plus I'm great in mathematics. I should have been. If I could have easily been into business, and that would have been a breeze for me going through college. Whereas studying a field that you're not familiar with, it makes your college work a lot harder. But anyway. When I got finished with college and went to Vietnam, when I came back, most people that grow up around here, if they're into commercial fishing, they like that because you're your own boss, and you can work as hard as you want to work. Some people make a lot of money. Some people make very little, and it all depends on the person. Whether you hang on to your money, you got to have great equipment to work with, and if you spend your money as fast as you make it, you're never going to amount to a lot in commercial fishing business. But anyway,
you just loved the crabbing and you wanted to come back.
And plus. The biggest favor I think that my dad did by being so poor, he gave me the incentive to work hard and save money, because he never had anything. Plus, if he ever got a hold of a little bit of money, he was looking for something to spend it on, and I learned what not to do by growing up over here. And so anyway, When I came back from Vietnam, though, there were a few dealers around that bought crabs and fish, and from the 70s up to 1986, when I started this Outer Banks Seafood, I sold crabs and fish to other people, and we were finding that the harder you worked and the more you caught, the less money you got. And matter of fact, one fish dealer told me, he said you've got. He was saying that you need that a fisherman, if you paid him too much money, he wouldn't work hard. And I took that as means he was justifying taking my money and putting it in his pocket. But anyway. So in 1986, a group of us decided we're never really going to get ahead in this business unless a group of us get together, and which is not easy. You don't have contacts in New York and Philadelphia and Chicago like I have now. You don't have any contacts. You don't know where to go. But we struggled for a year or so learning who to deal with and who not to deal with and so forth. But Plus, some of these other dealers, they controlled the freight business, and they didn't want you breaking away from them, so they didn't want to haul your freight. I remember when I first started, I had to buy a truck of my own. I couldn't ship baskets of crabs into New York because other people weren't going to haul them for me. So I bought my own truck. We put crabs in crates and hauled over to Madame Mesquite Seafood. And luckily back then there were lots of crabs, and we would it was easy to put 10,000 pounds a day on that truck going over to Madame Mesquite, and we worked on very little profit in order to get our way in with them. And for 20 years, after a while, we were able to make a little bit more per box on them, and plus we had the volume where we could make money. And I became, for years, one of the sole people that they depended on, so it worked out great. And it also gave me, by putting crabs on my own truck, and I had a driver to drive them over, it gave me an opportunity to get off early afternoon or mid-afternoon and spend time like playing golf with the kids when Adrian and Jason, when they were growing up. And so the difference now is that we put crabs in bushel baskets, and my days are a lot longer because I have to wait on freight trucks that come late in the afternoon. But while the kids were growing up, when we were selling the Madame Mesquite, that worked really good at the time.
Good.
How much has it changed since all the picking houses have closed? Things changed over a period of time. The volume, there are so many people crabbing now that I can remember when there were only a limited number of us that were in the crabbing business in eastern North Carolina, and now there must be 50 times as many people if you include all the Vietnamese that have come over. That Robert White from Frog Island I think he's married to a Vietnamese lady, and over a period of time, more and more of those people showed up, and it's only natural if you get, as opposed to hundreds of pots, and you get up into hundreds of thousands, that you're going to catch less crabs, which generally means that the prices will be better if you know where to go with them. But instead of depending on volume at a picking house, sometimes we'll put the crabs in baskets and go into the markets where you can still make a good day's work with a lot less volume than what we did. And that's the way things have changed. The other biggest change is that in this area, all the development used to, you could fish gill nets or haul seines or whatever, and you're the only person on the water. You don't have a lot of tourist boats just running here, there, and everywhere. You're not, your nets don't get cut up. But now all the shorelines are covered with docks and boats, and we're limited. There's less areas where we can fish. If we're flounder fishing with gill nets, you got to be careful where you put them now, or they're going to get destroyed. But boat traffic, even though we have them well marked, a lot of people a lot of people are not familiar with.
Yeah, they're just not educated.
Yeah, they are not educated on what those buoys mean and so forth. So we have to be really careful about what we do. But
excuse me, I was just going to say, why don't you walk us through a typical day of yours crabbing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, today, a typical day would be that we would get up maybe at least an hour and a half before daylight. I would drive over to Collington, and I usually get my bait out of a freezer and maybe break. We use menhaden for bait. That we buy that from a professional bait company in Virginia, and it's usually in 50-pound cardboard, what we call flats, like a small cardboard carton that's only about 6 inches tall. But anyway, we break up the bait and put that in the boat and load up the baskets, and usually you'll have a person on the boat with you to go out and cull the crabs. So I have a cull table that's built in the boat. So when we go out on the water, and nowadays we use a GPS, so you're looking at that screen, and it'll, I can, instead of running around in the middle of the sign looking for my pots, I can follow my tracks on that GPS right to the end of my line of pots, which I usually have several lines, but wherever I want to go. So anyway, I'll start fishing these pots, and we have the automatic pot pullers on the boats. It's still a lot of work, and that when you hook a buoy, a lot of times if you're with the tide, you got to really pull hard to get that rope into your pot puller, which we as I'm coming to a pot, I'll flip the switch on and it'll start spinning, but I'll get that rope in the pot puller, and it'll do the work getting the pot to the surface. And as it breaks the surface, I'll cut the pot puller off, and then I have to lift the pot with the crabs out of the water and unsnap it and turn it over and dump the crabs in the cull table, and we're still moving ahead toward the next pot, and my mate will be separating the number one males, which is the big heavy males that are usually have some brown on their underside where they're rusty colored, and the number two males, which are what we call white bellies, and then the number threes are the females, which are they're the most prized crab in New York because they have the Chinese and the Koreans in New York, and that's what they want, are the female crabs. But anyway, the males will go to other markets like Philadelphia and occasionally a few in New York. But anyway,
and we're talking hard crabs, or
we're talking about the hard crabs, and so anyway, we proceed. We usually, when I'm fishing pots like this, if I'm not in too much of a rush, I'll still go down a line of pots and fish about 50 pots in an hour or something like that if I'm making decent time. But with two of us on the boat, but anyway, we'll usually fish about 300 pots, and that's what I usually do. I fish about 300 pots in a day. And
is that all out in around Collington Island?
What happens? The really smart guys, they know more about what's under the water in Dare County than they do what's on the shore. In other words, we know every muddy. I think I know every muddy slough between Collington and Hatteras, and if you want to catch males, you know you can run over. The water all looks alike, but you run right over here to a certain spot, and you're looking at your depth finder, and when you hit that spot you're looking for, and you if I don't need to, but if I stuck a pole down, it's soft battery type mud. And that's where the males like that. In other words, there's certain areas we know ahead of time where we go if we want to catch females. Or now you're going to catch some of each any place you go, but generally. But like up in Currituck Sign, you're going to catch most of the time primarily all males. The water's fresher in Currituck Sign, but whereas down toward Wanchese, you're going to catch more females. The water's saltier. Because, you know, we live in an estuary, which is a meeting place of fresh and salt water, and you can't pinpoint any one area. If I had to pick an area, I'd say like the Manteo Bridge, the Manteo Causeway going over to Manteo. That would be maybe if I had to pick an area that would be a meeting place of fresh and salt water. But you have to keep in mind, on hard northerly winds, the fresh water moves south, and when the ocean's been rough on a northeaster, and then the salt water pours into the signs out of the ocean. When the ocean's rough, then the salt water comes a lot further north. So there's no one spot you can pick and say that this is the meeting place. So, but it's good to work in an estuary area, because you can target whatever type of fish or crabs you want, and depending on the salinity of the water, you can usually catch whatever you want to target.
So you said you do about 300 pots a day?
And some people, there's some of these bigger boats I hear out of Englehart and Stumpy Point, and they'll have like 3 people on a boat, and it's typical for them to fish 500 or 600 pots a day. Now, recently, my son's boat was broken down. He was in the shop, so when I went out with he and his mate, and we could fish his 300 pots between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock. We could fish 300 pots in 4 hours with 3 of us on the boat, because we're a lot faster with 3 people. And those big boats typically use at least 3 people on the boat at all times. So you can go through a lot of pots a lot faster if you have 3 people, a lot faster than 2.
So you bring the crabs back to your property on Collington Island. Is that the same property where you grew up?
Yes, it is. And we've made improvements. I have a huge metal A-roof that's built over top of the coolers, and we have this big dock where we come in boats can come right up and tie right up to the dock. There's a canal that comes down and into my place, and they come in and.
Now who's that?
Well, the crabbers. Right now there's 9 of us. Well, it might be 10 counting me, I guess, if I have crab pot set. When I was younger, I crabbed all year, and generally in the wintertime we could still crab between Hatteras and Ocracoke. And what happens when it gets cold and the water temperature gets below 50 degrees, you generally won't catch crabs. So we'd go down to Hatteras, and down there the ocean was still warm, and even cold weather. It took a long time. We'd be up into mid-January, and the water had still not chilled down enough. When what we call the flood tide, when the tide floods and ebbs twice a day, and or every 6 hours. But anyway. Whenever the ocean water came in, even if it got to the point where the sound water was below 50 degrees, that ocean water was still warm enough that however far that flood tide reached into the sound, you could catch crabs wherever that flood tide reaches. So that extended our crabbing season well up into the winter. And
so you bring them in after those hours, and your other 9 people that are crabbers.
Usually get in. Some of them will start coming in 11 o'clock in the mornings. My crew, everybody's generally in by 1:30. And we're when they come to the dock, the baskets are marked. They've got a 1, 2, or a 3 on them, and we put them on wooden pallets, and we separate. All the 3s go on a pallet. When we get 24 baskets on a pallet, we use this heavy-duty saran wrap to wrap those things around them so they won't fall over. We'll put a pallet jack underneath of them once they're wrapped, and roll that whole pallet right into the cooler. And we'll do the same for 1s, 2s, or 3s. But generally speaking, in our area, generally you won't see a lot of number 1s. The really good Jimmy crabs. It's generally mostly all 2s and 3s. We get a few few number ones.
So how long do they stay in the cooler before they're trucked?
All right. When the guys come in the middle of the day, I'm already by midday, I'm already talking to people in New York and Philadelphia, and they'll tell me what they would like to get the next morning. And so by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the tractor trailers will come, or tractor trailer will come in, and in where my place is located over on Collington, down the lane from the fire station, they'll come in and turn into a side road that goes to developments back in the woods, and then back around in my lane and right on down.
Now, and this transfer, is this the truck that y'all own?
No,
that you hire someone.
For years, Wanchese Fish Company down in Wanchese owns numerous tractor trailers, and then within about two or 3 years ago, they sold the Wanchese Fish Company business, including all their scallop boats in Argentina and everything. They sold the entire business for millions of dollars to a Canadian firm, a fellow named Cook, I think. And anyway, now that Canadian firm still continues using some of the same trucks, I guess, to come into my place. But anyway, the crabs that were caught that morning are generally in baskets on a tractor trailer headed somewhere by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And when they get in New York, the idea is to get to New York by about 2 a.m. in the morning, because their business day is from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. By 8 a.m., their business day is over in New York. Now in Philadelphia, the business day will the business day will last up until about 11 or maybe even noon sometimes up there. But it's still an early morning business. But I noticed that sometimes they don't want to tell me what they want the next day in Philly until later in the day, because some of their business, they want to see what they end up selling. But New York, by 8 o'clock, they're done. So,
do you sell any locally?
Not much. We not really. I have one fella here on the beach that owns a business that I sell some soft crabs to. But
all right, so how is your soft crab business different from your hard crab business?
Well, in order to people that are familiar with it, in order to catch soft shell crabs, you don't really catch soft shell crabs. You catch the peeler crab, which you have to have the knowledge to be able to look at this crab and determine that it is a peeler crab, and that season starts in late April and lasts usually through the month of May, and we catch some peeler crabs all summer in the crab pot. See, a male, it's typical for a male to carry a female underneath of him. And what he'll do, he'll carry the female with her top shell up against his bottom, up underneath, touching his underside. But he likes to select a female that is what we call ripe, one that's not too far from being ready to molt or shed. And if he's still carrying her in the wild when she sheds, he'll flip her upside down underneath of him and mate with her. He'll fold her apron back, and that's where his sex organs are like two hair-like tentacles that are maybe inch or inch and a half long or something. And when he folds her apron back, he can she has openings there where he mates with her. And anyway, he'll carry in the wild, he'll carry that crab. I have caught those crabs, those double crabs, and the female has shedded, and which she'd be really soft, but she has already turned rock hard again. So he's been mating with her for days, But anyway, but what we do, we catch these peelers by the thousands, and the way we catch these peeler crabs is when a female crab, when an immature female, when she gets to a certain, start with small crabs shed. Little crabs shed several times in a year, and as they get older, they shed less frequently. That's how they grow. So naturally, as they get toward more full size, they're going to shed less. But But anyway, when a female crab gets to a certain stage, what we call a V-apron crab, she's going to shed one more time, and that's going to be the last time she ever sheds. She's going to be a mature female, and by instinct, they know that the female knows that she will not be fertile later in life unless she mates when she sheds that last time. She knows that she has to mate. So we take advantage of that instinct. We put big male, these heavy male crabs, not the freshly shedded, but the really fat, heavy ones. We put one of them in a bait compartment where the female cannot get to him, and it is not unusual to catch 50 females in that pot trying to get to that male to mate with him. Wow. And that's how we catch those peeler crabs. You want to use the biggest, meanest males we got, in order to catch those females, the really strong males. But anyway, we'll take, when we catch these peeler crabs, there's several ways we can look at their fins, the color. There's several ways we can look at it, and we'll know if that crab is going to shed in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 days. And we separate those crabs. We separate 3 ways. The white lines, the ones that are not red, it's going to be like 3 or 4 days off, and the pink lines that are what we call the ones that are going to shed within 2 or 3 days, and then the red lines, the ones that are going to shed any time. A lot of times when you catch those red lines out in the sign, they look like they're going to shed that night. Well, it's typical that when you put a bunch of red lines in one of our boxes with the water spraying in there, that a lot of times they need to settle down. They'll take a day or so to settle down before they start shedding very much. Is
that a 24-hour work process?
What we do, we have a crew that checks those peeler crabs at nighttime. We have 4x8 fiberglass boxes with water spraying in there, these water lawn sprinkler pumps and swimming pool pumps that got a lot of pressure. And anyway, we'll have the water spraying into the boxes, and when people tend to them at nighttime, we make up these wire rings, and all the right peeler shedders will have a ring in it. And as we're going along checking, it's typical that you'll go to a shedder, and my time for checking crabs is usually prior to daylight in the morning. Someone else may check them at 10 o'clock at night or something while I'm sleeping, but I'll come in maybe 4 o'clock in the morning and sometimes as early as 2 o'clock in the morning and start checking those things. And the procedure works something like this. I'll come to one, and I can easily spot the empty sheds where a crab has pulled out of. So it's typical for me. I'll start counting those sheds and putting them in a plastic tote, to be disposed of. And if I count 50 sheds and I've got them all, then now I'm going to start looking for 50 soft crabs. I'm going to count them as I take out. But as I take them out, a lot of them are firm enough. When a crab first sheds, they're very fragile. They've got a lot of wrinkles where when they pull out, they need to fill out if you leave them in the water for a while, they'll fill out these wrinkles, and they become more hardy where they can swim around. They can hardly move when they wiggle a little bit, but they're fragile. So what we do as we're checking a shedder, everything that's firm enough, I'm putting in these special made trays that we buy up out of Maryland, and trays where you can put 3 dozen large soft crabs to a tray. And anyway, every time I come to one that hasn't filled those wrinkles out and he's real mushy soft, they go into a ring in there. And the reason for that is later on somebody's going to come along, and instead of having to search for all those crabs among all the peelers, he's going to come and they're all right in that ring already. So it just somebody 2 hours after somebody checked those crabs, they'll come through and get everything out of the rings, and it's a lot quicker than having to search for them in the midst of all those peelers. But generally about every 4 or 5 hours, we'll have to go through and repeat that process. Some will go into rings, some will go into trays, and
so that's the same market.
Yeah, we'll ship those crabs. We ship a lot of them into New York, and if the New York market gets glutted, the John Handy Company up in Crisfield, Maryland, they sell crabs worldwide, and they have lots of people in there, professional people cutting those crabs and wrapping and freezing, and when we during the glut, we get less money when there's a lot of them, but we do have a market to move. No matter how many you got, you can move those crabs, but you may have to go to a cutting house and get less money for them. But anyway, when we first start in the early spring, soft shells are the price is really high, and as the volume picks up, the price will start dropping.
What about, do you do any fishing, or are you just all crab?
Okay, from back in 1980, let's see, when I came back from Vietnam in 71, from 1980 to 84, I got out of crabbing almost completely, and I didn't have the business going until 1986. But from 80 to 84, I had this what we call a long haul seine, and it's a little over a mile long, and we set out this net that's it's only about 6 feet deep, and it goes to the bottom. And even if you're fishing, and we had it designed to catch fish like croaker, trout, and spot. But
you say we had it designed. Who designed?
Okay. Jane and I one winter hung a mile of net with a net needle. It took us. We were picking up like two.
Jane, your loyal wife.
Yeah. Hey, we were picking up. You pick up like 2 meshes of net. Then you put like 3 half hitches around. The ropes are stretched up tight, top line, bottom line. Top line has floats. The bottom line has leads on it, and we stretch them up at the right tension. One line is tighter, a little bit tighter than the other. Both of them are about the same tension, but one of them with the leads droops a little more than the other. But we wanted to get the right tension on them. But anyway, you pick up like two meshes of webbing. Of course, there's wholesalers or retailers that sell this webbing. They sell all the supplies. But anyway, you pick up a couple of meshes, and we got a net needle that we put this twine on these net needles, and we're hanging this with these net needles. You stick the net needle through like 2 meshes, then put maybe 3 half hitches around the line, and then you're hanging. If you're hanging like 3 inch net, or 3.5 or 4 inch, say you're hanging some 4 inch net, you're only going 4 inches at a time. So you can imagine how long it's going to take to hang a mile of net with 3. But anyway, she and I one winter hung a mile of net, and the net that we hung, it's really about 6 feet deep. But if you're fishing in 16 feet of water and you're pulling these haul seines, we set out in a half moon shape and pulled both ends with boats with diesel engines, and we're over there. If the net's a mile long, we're only about 3/4 of a mile apart in order to have some bow in the net back there. You don't want it straight across. It's kind of in a semicircle, half moon behind you, and anyway. If you're pulling long in 16 feet of water, we generally would want to sweep through a certain area and then come around to form a circle. But with that net only 6 feet deep, and she goes to the bottom, it's hung so that she'll sink. Those fish, even though the water is there's 10 feet of water over top of your net, they will not come up and go over top of that net. They'll go right along, herd right along in front of it. Those croaker, they'll stay right there. And anyway, we had about 200 yards of really deep net, and some of it was like 30 feet deep. and the last like 20 yards was like 50 feet deep. And what happens when you haul that haul seine? You come around and you got that deep net on one end of your net, and you come around together and you anchor one boat, and then you pull around in a circle, and there's what we call a net skiff with your crew back there in it, and they're taking up one side of the circle into the boat, making the circle smaller and smaller. And when you get down to the last 200 yards, it's all deep net. Well, when you,
and we're talking in the ocean.
No, we're in the
you're in the
Seine. We're in the Seine. We
catching those fish in the Seine.
In the Seine. A box of fish, whether it be a wooden box or a tote, we generally are talking about 100 pounds of fish. And like a box of crabs would be equal to 2.5 bushels. A bushel would be 40 pounds. But anyway, a box of fish would be 100 pounds. That's what, if somebody said I caught 10 boxes of fish, he means I caught 1,000 pounds. So anyway, I can remember down in Hatteras one time, we had that deep net that Jane and I hung, and we had that mile of 6 feet deep, and then with that deep net on one end, and we took up that net until we got to the last 200 yards, and then what you do with this net skiff, if the tide is running into the north, you want to end up on the side to where your net is out in a half moon to the north. So if the tide was sweeping from your side, it'll collapse your net one side onto the other. But anyway, if you anchor your boat off. We used like 4 anchors so we could tighten down where she weren't going to move one way or the other. And what we do, we have, it's not easy, but we had an aluminum staff with a net sewn to it, and then another aluminum staff with that we used for a pull-under pole. So what happens, if you can imagine, you stick one of the staff that's got the net sewn to it into the bottom, and then your pull-under pole, you feel the tip end of that stake down there, and the two tips are together. Then as you take the rest of this deep net in, you pull right under one pole and right up beside the other, leaving no hole down at the bottom for anything to get out. Wow. So what happens, I was just going to describe this one day that was really not typical. This was an unusual day. Down in Hatteras, we were pulling that net, making that circle smaller and smaller in 16 feet of water. And when we got down to about maybe 30 or 40 yards of net left out, we had so many croaker in there that their fins were out of the water in 16 feet of water. Anyway, what happened, those fish panicked, which they'll always do when you got that many. They panicked and they charged into the net. And they dragged us right down the side of the boat, and they opened that, they pulled the net away from those poles where we had her closed off, and they poured out of her by the tens of thousands of pounds poured out of it. They poured out of her. Oh, they're powerful. I've had them turn my boat on its side where water's pouring into the side of the boat, and then when they settle down, the boat will come back down. But we've had them do that. With the croakers are powerful. But anyway, what happened? We lost a major portion of that catch, but we still saved 835 boxes of those with 100 pounds per box. That was 83,500 pounds we saved that day. Two big boats from Englehard came alongside. We have we have dip nets that are like 3 feet across, and we bail hydraulically. We had these booms you lower down, and a man sitting there operating a hydraulic winch. And if I drive the dip net into the fish, and he hits that lever, and when he snatches the dip net out of the fish, she'll come up with about 300 pounds in a dip net at a time. And another man is operating a drawstring with a bunch of rings on the bottom of the dip net. And when I shove the fish, those 300 pounds over the surface of the boat, then he'll release that drawstring, and 300 pounds will spill right out. So it would take us about 45 minutes to load 200 boxes of fish on a boat. Which, see, when I grew up on Collington Island, we did this long haul seining, and we bailed them out by hand with small dip nets, and it took forever to load a boat with
So
fish.
did you just decide you'd rather be crabbing and you stopped fishing, or it was this group?
Okay, there was a period of time. There was a period of time back in the early '80s when a lot of there was a period of time for years when no croaker showed up in the signs, and then back in the early '80s, my dad had always told me that these croaker will come in cycles. So in the early '80s, those croaker showed up. So we got the idea that it might last a few years. So we decided to go into this long haul seining. There was a friend of mine over in Stumpy Point named Milton Hooper, and he was going to buy a fiberglass boat, and he said it was going to cost him over $100,000 for it. So he said he and his wife debated, and he said we prayed about it whether he was going to do it. He said I paid for the boat in 30 days. That he was a really good fisherman, it's Milton Hooper, but they were catching 400 to 500 boxes of those croaker a day there for a while, and but anyway, he told me about how fast he paid for that boat, and he was scared to death that he might lose the boat, might never pay for it, but then they caught so many fish that he paid for it very quickly. But
did you sell those in Wanchese?
We sold when we were down to Hatteras. Charles Nunnemaker, he was an old man that bought fish and crabs over on Collington Island, but he also had a place that he had rented down in Hatteras, and we sold those to him. Like he had a tractor trailer. Well, he had a fish house down there, and people that sorted the fish. And it takes a lot of people to handle an operation. Whether it's the fishermen. Usually, it took 4 of us on our boat. If you looked at the obituaries, this guy a couple of days ago, Asa Gray, just died. He was one of my crew during that 4-year period from 1980 to 84. And his brother Rudy Gray was one of them. And guy Kenny Pierce, I don't know if you know him. He's in the concrete business, but he was the 4th crew member. But anyway, we sold those fish in Hatteras. But when we were up here, we sold some fish in Wanchese. For a couple of years, we sold some to this guy Benny Rippins over in Mans Harbor. He doesn't do too much anymore, I don't think, except his own crabs. But anyway, so it's not necessarily any one place that we sold those fish to, but you have to have a facility where you can come to the dock. And like Wanchese Fish Company, they got lots of people working there, and somebody's bailing those fish off of the boat and onto a conveyor. Generally, that conveyor is running, and people up there sorting them and icing the boxes, putting them in there, and putting them on the trucks and so forth. So it takes a big crew to do it.
So when you were fishing, and then the croaker, I guess, didn't come back or whatever, and you decided to crab, did you already have your crab equipment, or was that when you started?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I had some crab pots back then, but when I quit fishing at the end of 4 years, and the main reason I quit, it turned out to be lucky for me, because after I got out of it, the reason I got out of it is because I was leaving home at 2:00 in the morning. The kids were asleep, and the kids. Let's see, this was the early 80s. Adrian was born in 76, and Jason in 78, Megan 82. The kids were asleep when I left, and they would be asleep when I got home. Right. But anyway, so after 4 years, I decided to get out of it, but it turned out lucky for me, because those croaker didn't last much beyond that. They might have caught some 1 year after I got out of it, but basically that cycle was over. And
well, I hate to ask one last question, because it's really fascinating, and I know we learned a lot.
Yeah.
Regulations.
Oh yeah.
When you started fishing and crabbing and now
Yeah.
I know your business is better and thriving,
Yeah.
and all the technology is wonderful, but how have the regulations really affected you?
Well, what happens when you have an area like, especially, it's not just Dare County, but I'll use Dare County as an example. When you have people, as many people moving in, you're going to have so many people on the water, and they're not interested in what you're doing and your heritage and what you've done for years. That humans generally are, I mean, in some cases, are very selfish, and they only think about themselves. And even if there's plenty of resource out there, some people are thinking, hey, there's only enough for me. There's not enough. Those commercial fishermen, they're going to catch up to fish. But what happens, because of regulations, sport fishermen have a powerful sport fishing lobby. And commercial fishermen, we do have a North Carolina Fisheries Association, and we have to fight like crazy to keep from getting put out of business altogether, because there is one group of individuals, and I don't know how big that is, but it's more than just a few that want commercial fishing. I've seen billboards saying no gill netting. You know, they want gill netters out of business. But anyway, the fish that the sport fishermen target are mainly speckled trout, rockfish, and red drum. Well, we, as you might expect, that sport fishing lobby has they have a lot more power than we do, and they've had regulations passed where I'm allowed 7 red drum a day. Last fall, they were here by the millions, and anyway, I'm allowed 7 a day, but I've got to throw those 7 back unless I've got a bycatch of an equal amount of weight of another fish. And that fish cannot just be any fish. It's got to be a flounder, a black drum, or then they threw in a bluefish and a mullet. Well, if you're flounder fishing with the size net we use for flounder fishing, you can catch the flounder and red drum, but you're not going to catch the bluefish and mullet because they won't fit that net. They're too small. They just go through it. So why they put that in as a bycatch, I don't know. But anyway. So the law is this: if I'm fishing my nets, even if I know by the time I get finished I'm going to have, say, 50 pounds of flounder, if I catch 50 pounds of red drum and I catch them first, by law I've got to throw them away. But the law is, this is my opinion, and I feel certain I'm right. That law was set up in that way in order to make it more burdensome for me to catch those 7 fish. In other words, it would make sense if you're going to let a commercial fisherman catch 7 of a certain species of fish, let him catch the 7 fish. I mean, but when you put in the stipulations that you've got to have a bycatch and it has to be a certain type of fish, to me, you're purposely trying to favor one user group over the other. So anyway, that's the type of thing we deal with nowadays. Yeah. I actually got a warning ticket last year when I was going to have my flounder, but when guys came to me, I had 6 red drum and I only had 2 flounder right then. But before the day was over, I had my fish, but I wasn't allowed to have 6 red drum without the. But at least the guy did give me a warning ticket, though. Yeah. So I mean, if he'd give me a ticket, not only would it cost me $200 and some, if I got another ticket, I lose my commercial fishing license. But let me say this too: if you get a ticket, you automatically lose your gill net permit without even going to a judge to find out if you're guilty. You lose your gill net permit before you ever go to court. So anyway, the regulations are strict on us, and we have to be careful because there's a lot of areas that I cannot fish on weekends. I can fish there, but not on weekends. I can't fish from midnight on Friday through midnight Sundays because it's reserved for sport fishermen. A lot of areas are. So anyway, but it's just something we have to live with. But see, when I was growing up as a kid, you could catch, if you were lucky enough to get in an area where you could catch fish, any sellable fish, we could keep what we caught, but the things have changed,
tremendously.
And
well, Robbie, this has been really, really wonderful, informational. You love your job, you love your business, and your son's working in it, and everything is really really interesting, and we've learned so much, and we appreciate you taking your time for Coastal Voices. You definitely have coastal heritage with your deep family roots here, and we just appreciate the oral history, and Coastal Voices will publish it on the website, and we will have a couple of pictures, and we wish you best of luck continuing your crabbing and fishing and coastal heritage stories.
I would like to make one other comment. At my age right now, I'm to the point where I would like to exit the business of having the hassles of buying the stuff and the everyday business of spending all these hours going through that it takes to get rid of the product, and in some cases having to wait months to get paid. I'd like to exit the business, but the crabbers and stuff that deal with me, there's not too many places for them to go right now. They'd have to switch to some other dealer, but right now that's my biggest worry about where they're going to go to move their product if I get out of it, because I'm to the point where I'm about ready at my age to do that.
So you are a broker, essentially.
A young man that helps me from time to time with my yard work, Waylon Tillett. His father was here, and he spoke so well of you.
He sold crabs to me for years.
He said you had helped him and did a lot for him.
So do you think you could sell your broker business?
Oh no, not really. What I mean, see, like when this Nunnemaker I was telling about, Charles Nunnemaker, he still has. There's still the property with the harbor and everything. When he died, nobody moved in and took over that business there. I had my own location where I didn't need to go pay any money for his property to buy crabs. Well, I was already in business at the time. But what I'm saying is, nobody. If I got out of business, my crabbers would just switch over. They'd have to find somewhere else to go to sell their product. But nobody would pay me anything. The only thing that would be worth something, but I've never known of it done. But the connections that I have and the people that I sell to. But what's going to happen? I wouldn't worry about trying to get money out of that anyway. But what would happen? Anybody that wanted to sell something in New York, there's always somebody that you can find out the information from on who to go to. Right. But there's an old man in New York that I've been selling these female crabs to for about 20 or 25 years, and I actually one time saw an empty basket that had a tag on the side of it with his phone number, and I decided to call it. And anyway, that guy would, a real heavyset guy, he would come down here, and sometimes I would leave him asleep in a chair in my mobile home. He'd come down with a van or something, and when I went home, he'd say, I need to take a little bit of a nap, and then I'm going to try to get back into New York by 3 a.m. or something. So anyway, so that just by finding that tag on that basket, I've been dealing with that guy, I guess, for over 20 years, I reckon. I deal with his son mainly now, but he's still living, though, that old man.
Well, you've had a long, profitable career, and I know you've helped many people earn their living here in Dare County. And we wish you many more years of good health and good business, even though you do want to retire.
Yeah, well, if I was to get out of buying and going through the hassles of selling everybody else's stuff, I would still play around on the water some. I fish for fun of it now. I mean, like flounder fishing, I love that. Playing around with my net reel, I can handle it by myself. And
it's in your blood.
Yeah, I like being out on the water.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Robbie.
Okay. All right.